Ois Yud. The Frierdiker Rebbe is now going to present a fascinating detail that's pivotal to our Avodas Hashem, which is actually a technical skill. It's a discipline to know when not to invest, when not to go too deeply, when it's time to move on. Dr. Frierdiker Rebbe. The Rambam hoiked on a parak in Hilchos Deis. The Rambam begins one of the chapters in Hilchos Deis with the following lashon: that just as a chacham is distinguishable in his wisdom, which means his intellectual approach, his world unsound, in the same vein, he has to be distinguished by his actions, with, so to speak, a technical way of acting. Bepratis hat men gerat Yud Beis Tammuz. Specifically, we were discussing Yud Beis Tammuz, that a pnimi has to be very, very disciplined and orderly. And a Mesudar, someone that is orderly in everything. That means it's not just something he does, it's someone he is. And he appreciates the order itself. It's not just that this has to be orderly in order to get it done. He appreciates the fact that it's orderly. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, the Seder by him is oich mit Seder. Even the order itself has an order to it. And I'll just jump the gun and give you a little preview where the Frierdiker Rebbe is heading. That even when someone has it, to know, in order to keep a Seder, it's not enough just to apply oneself and delve deeply into how he's doing one specific thing, because it falls in within a bigger picture. And therefore, you have to have the discipline to be able to override, so to speak, what's needed what you're invested in right now with what's needed next. Dr. Frierdiker Rebbe. Hachana, preparation, is one of the inyanim that are pivotal. They're critical for Avodah, because hachana, that's what prepares you in order to be a receptacle, to be a klei kibul for the next stage that you're about to delve into. However, hachana also requires seder. And the seder can sometimes prove and point out that right now there's no hachana needed or necessary right now, which means that there are inyanim to which right now it's not the time to prepare in a lengthy way. Says the Frierdiker Rebbe, once by some of the Chassidim, which were Balei Tzura, they had a tzir pnimi, or they were real characters. They had real internal build-up of their level and status in Avodas Hashem. He says the inyan of achana sometimes did not exist. There was the concept called ha'ataka, which means someone uproots himself from where he's at and applies himself and implants himself, so to speak, in something else. Ha'ataka, says the Frierdiker Rebbe, means carrying oneself over from one inyan to the next. There are in these a few oifanim, few styles. He says, however, there is one that one moves himself away from things that are distracting him. But that, the Frierdiker Rebbe says, that's not what we're discussing. That's a very low level. Hataka essentially means that he uproots himself from one inyan that he's toiling in, he's invested in, and the Ikar Nakuda is that one has to be a Baldeya. He has to be able to have a strong opinion and approach to what needs to happen now. And then he can apply himself or uproot himself and apply himself to something else. He can have that level of discipline. And he says, to be a baldeya, to have a strong opinion about where you're at and where you need to be, that's needed for every chassid to get to this state. He said, we discussed in the previous Farbrengen, it was Yud Beis Tammuz, maybe it was earlier, that one should not be a makif to chassid, shouldn't be, so to speak, a out-of-body type of chassid or superficial. One is not, hence, this may lead to someone being mistaken in his avodas Hashem, and therefore, the Frierdiker Rebbe adds, one is not allowed to be a mut'eh, to be mistaken in his state. We're not holding by such levels of hataka, which we referred to earlier. Sometimes a disciplined person just applies himself, he uproots himself from what he's at, and places himself, his nefesh, in a new state. He says, La'esata, we have to toil in a lower discipline, which is called hafana, which means emptying oneself out from distractions, from things that don't belong in his mind. He says it's superfluous to start explaining the difference between hafana, which means emptying oneself out from distractions, to ha'ataka, to being able to actively apply himself to something. Chassidus in general, sharpens the klei haseichel, the intellectual faculties in one's mind. He says, when one understands an inyan sichli in a clean and clear way, so even though ha'ataka is a great level, as we said, the discipline to apply oneself, but one will start, even if that's a high level, he's going to pull himself in that direction and want to hold by that level, and when one harvest, one toils with a strong will and a desire, pnimi, the Eibishter will help. Ois Yud Aleph. Friedrich Rebbe is going to describe how Limud HaTorah should look. This is actually in continuation to what the Friedrich Rebbe said earlier in the Farbrengen, that the Atzei Chaim, what gives, and the handle to Torah, and what gives life, is the Kviyus Itim LaTorah, to setting a fixed times in learning. And the Friedrich Rebbe discussed earlier how to combat the Yetzer Hara that tries to distract with Tirutzim. So here the Friedrich Rebbe is Miroimim, and he says, and that's what causes the Torah to rejoice with us. So he says the Eibusha should help. As Torah is also framed, Torah should rejoice with us. It should be Simchas Torah. Torah should take rejoice. And if Torah is freilach and it rejoices, then Simchas Torah will continue throughout the entire year. The Simchas Torah will shine and provide light in all the medinas where Yidden find themselves, all countries, in all Jewish houses. It's going to be freilach, and it's going to be the Torah Simcha. And the Mishnah says, whoever, someone that so to speak establishes Torah out of a poor financial state, will in the end be zeicha to fulfill Torah within abundance of wealth. So, we described earlier that Torah does not remain in debt for those that learn Torah, and to those that are invested and ensure that Torah is learned in public. If a Yid, says the Friedrich Rebbe, afar harveter, he's after toiling, working hard, after a full hard day's work, or a ungebrenter from the sun, he's scorched from the sun, or a ungefreiner from Kelt, or he's frostbitten from cold. By night he sits down to his shir of Torah. The Torah awakens rachmim, compassion and kindness above, for this Yid and his household. Simchas Torah, it is if you learn Torah. Then the Torah is besimcha. And Torah poils, it affects and causes roiv tuv, abundance of good for the entire Klal Yisrael, and b'meila it's going to be lichtig, it's going to be light and shining, begashmis and beruchnis for all Yidden. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, it's true that anyone that establishes Torah, that's referring to not only the person that is learning actually on his own, rather to one that establishes Torah. In Torah it says, someone that fulfills what it says in Torah, which means the kima mitzvahs b'poil, first of all, just fulfilling the mitzvahs that the Torah requires, but also those that act with midas toivus, beautiful character traits between man, bein adam l'chaveiroi, the way Torah shines the light and guides us. But the hagdama to fulfilling is learning. And the limud is then, if it's that type of hachana, that limud is yir shamayim, which means that in addition to the shir of Torah that you learn, we need to have, so to speak, the hakdama, which is you need to learn Musar and Chassidus. Then the learning goes to the heart, and the limud of Torah becomes kiyum Torah, the fulfillment of Torah and the embodiment of Torah. He establishes Torah within himself. Every Yid, says the Friedrich Rebbe, that has Avas Yisrael, that has Pashut, he loves another Yid, he wants the best for Klal Yisrael, Beruchnis and Begashmis, has to understand and to explain to those close to him and all those acquaintances that he has the ethical responsibility that lies upon every Yid to learn Torah every day. Each person must, based on his level and status, be a part of a chevra that learns a shir kavua, a specific area in Torah, and a specific allotted section or time in each day. Am Elkei Avram, says the Friedrich Rebbe, the nation of the God of Avram have always been, and Baruch Hashem continuously, Baruch Hashem still are. They stood on a high level in intellectual development, and that's and where they intellectual surroundings. They are Am Chacham B'Navim, a wise nation in the fullest expression and explanation of this word. Every Yid, even one that has over certain family opportunities in his due to family circumstances in his younger years, he learned very little. Still, mitzad his cognitive ability, he can understand well a blat gemara, a seichel an intellectual approach, an understanding, a perspective. Every Yid yearns to hear of our Torah and to understand it, and it sticks to him. He will feel a sense of gishmak, and it gives him content, of a good feeling when he learns Torah. A Yid must have a ruchnistic sustenance as well. He can't be just satisfied by having gashmis alone. Every Yid has a feel for ruchnius, and his inner spirit that yearns to grow higher and higher than the just fleischige Weltleben, the physical, coarse, worldly life. By every Yid, they hold tire their yichus, where they stem from. His tzur machzavtoi, his root, it's really the stone out of which he was carved. With the deepest neshama feeling, he takes care, so to speak, and delicately appreciates his Ur Eltonin, his ancestors. And with the greatest joy, he applies himself in every opportunity to discuss and to batonter by Yeder Gelegenheit his Seder Yuchsen, the order of his lineage of Rabbanim and those of Lemdei Torah. In this, obviously, there are various styles and ways that it's done, and more or less, some more, some less. But even by those that are Rahman al-Itzlan, very, very farkilte Yidden that are cooled off, by them there is also this vital point that from time to time it falls in by them zechronis, memories of his roots, his past, and he searches and seeks to be makabel from those that are close to him, those that were Rabbanim, those that were Bnei Torah. Says the Previous Rebbe, it's really extra and superfluous just to talk over this vart, because by each person there are these opportunities, and pretty often between those when he's between those that know him, those that his acquaintances, that they all nebach are far from Torah, and with the greatest passion and sukochtkeit, he starts talking and recounting about each one starts talking and recounting their parents and their family members that are Bnei Torah. Friedrich Rebbe demonstrates this by describing that in the winter of Tafresh Pei Aleph, we were in Rostov in Russia, and this is in the Hunger years. It's right after the revolution that they overthrew the Tsar and communism began. The situation then, everybody knows the state in which we were in. He says it was the beginning of a new power, and at that point the Yusewitz, which was the Jewish arm of the Communist Party that were vehemently against development of Torah, they began to disturb and distract the Moistei Hadas, the institutions of Torah and religious institutions. The mikveh question, however, at that point became very hard to find the mikveh. It should be in use properly. Till then, says the Friedrich Rebbe, all the Moistei Hadas, the established Yiddishkeit, was in the best orderly way possible. He said it was hard to find, even in a Ir ve'em b'Yisrael, that there should be, not only in a place like a city on the Don River, which is Rostov, and over there, says the Friedrich Rebbe, no Yid was allowed to live if they didn't have a special permit. He says, over there, for sure, it would have been hard to find. Kolshkein and other cities. So it says the Friedrich Rebbe, in truth, it's a mitzvah to discuss this in great detail, because from here you're going to see the beauty of the nature of Yiddish face and the face of Judaism. Rostov was a city that only craftsmen lived, and those that had higher education, prestigious people, they were allowed to live there. It's understood that Bnei Torah and people that were outspoken Yirei Elokim or Durche means they were saturated Yirei Elokim. They didn't travel to Rostov, and mitzad the law legalities, they weren't even allowed to come there. Once upon a time, says the Friedrich Rebbe, Yiddish craftsmen that were educated with a true, healthy Yiddish chinuch, they began to build right away moistes hadas, institutions of religion, whether it's shuls or lahavdil based tefillah. It's interesting, Friedrich Rebbe says a few times, lahavdil, to make this distinction between a shul and a mikveh. It's reminiscent of the Rabbi when the Rabbi spoke around Hey Tavis. Every person should buy a pushka and lahavdil, svarim and lahavdil a pushka. It's more an object, it's not a sefer. In the kleine Eda, even in the small little community that they grew up, there should be big shuls and lahavdil, big beis tefillah, and other various institutions of tzedakah. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, all these things were financially and materialistically, they were supported also by the diplomatic Yidden that were secular, and with the greatest interest they took in it and passion. Even these Freie Yidden took. So the Friedrich Rebbe, by the first possibility that they were allowed to, that with tremendous shtadlonos and working efforts by the government, they poiled by the czarist regime and government, that one should be able to bring down a Rav that was a big Lamdin, a Shoichet, and that were big Yirei Elokim. Even the secular Yidden helped make that come about. We, says the Friedrich Rebbe, and many other Polish Yidden, that we escaped from the various places where the Milchama was taking place, and we came to Rostov. And he's going to describe the amazing Ruchnistic estate they found Rostov in, which was very recent, because earlier on, they weren't allowed to live in Rostov. Dr. Friedrich Rebbe. Despite the fact, not cooking of them, that it was just a small time after the Tsarist Russia, they gave the permission, they gave the rights to live in this area for Yidden in these cities. We found, says the Friedrich Rebbe in Rostov, all the religious institutions in the best and most orderly fashion. He says there were chadarim for children, where the children learned exactly like in the Yiddish shtet. The achnasas archim of the people, the artige, those that lived over there, was for all Yidden without. He says all the Yidden took part in this without any differences, whether they were from or not from. They all showed. They showed tremendous achnasas archim, says Friedrich Rebbe. You can't even. It's undescribable. Baruch Hashem, all those that came to the city of Rostov, they were escaping the war-torn areas and didn't need any material help. Everything, he says, what overrode all of that in its beauty was the kiruv hadas, that the closeness that they all displayed, and hence that brought a tremendous comfort to all those that have just been refugees. The Yosef of the Kehillah, the leader of the Kehillah, and some of the board members, which were lie there very, very far from the way Chashav Balbatim Bnei Torah and the Yiddish little Shtetlach looked, in their first meeting of the Kehillah discussion, they right away expressed their. I guess this was a meeting together with the refugees that came. It was a delegation, so they came. They expressed their tremendous joy in the fact that all these Yiddish families have just joined and immigrated to Rostov, and he says they said they're ready to give shuls for those that want to daven in their own nusach. They're ready to establish chadarim for their children according to the style of chinuch that they want, and they asked of all those families that came, they should feel at home, just like in their Polish shtet where they came from, where they escaped. They asked that one should. they asked that each should want to take part in the Moisei Adas V'Torah, and each should help with the Rav that they brought down, and all those, and they should help support all those that want to take interest in strengthening the Moises. In all these things, you can see the natural Yiddish panim el panim, face to face. The beauty of the Yiddish feelings are never chas v'shalom drown in the shturim, in the storm of the Yiddish, of the worldly life, and never gets chas v'shalom lost in the secular lifestyle. He says throughout a few years, until this new government was established and stood up, we're talking about the Communist Party, Rostov was completely revived with its Yiddishkeit Leben. He says the Friedrich Rebbe, just to demonstrate this, in a winter day, there came a very severe order that the mikveh has to be closed, locked. And right away they formed a committee with a specific doctor that led it, and they found out that the mikveh, so to speak, that the mikveh is not hygienic, is not clean, and it didn't help the fact that the truth was everybody knew and everybody saw that the mikveh could be very, very clean. A few days later, after we found out when the doctor, who the doctor is, the one that led that effort of closing the mikveh, they started finding out the ideas about him came back very bad. That in this regard, he's from the Greste Machribe Das. He's from the biggest destroyers of the religion. By us, that means in discussion with all the activists, they decided that says the Friedrich Rebbe about himself, will call the doctor to invite him to visit me and have it out, a debate, and explain it to him. This happened this was one of the hardest things in those times, but still that came to pass. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, we spent together a winter evening, and we started discussing, random things, until, says the Friedrich Rebbe, the doctor started telling about his roots, from where he grew up, who his Zayda was, and while talking about this, that it presented itself an opportunity to bring up, says the Friedrich Rebbe, the mikveh question. And Baruch Hashem, I was poyel, says the Friedrich Rebbe. He himself started giving aids how we can actually get a permit for the mikveh. So Friedrich Rebbe he warmed them up to bring up his own past, and once they're in that space, every Yid is open to reawaken his passion for connecting to the Eibishter in his own way and helping Yiddishkeit. Says the Friedrich Rebbe, there were many such examples, and there are in the thousands, that show what a Yid really is, and what type of ruchnistic nekuda point is embedded within a Yid. There has not yet been, and there will not be, someone that can estimate what a Yiddish heart possesses. The emes is that sometimes there can be light and darkness, good and bad, that they actually serve and present themselves in a mixed fashion, and therefore you could see modern things by Yidden and the way they act. He says there are sometimes foolish, cunning and foolish, shrewd of oimik tachas that are from the deepest of the low that can present itself, but there are also maisim toivim that are the highest of high, great heights. The oimik roim. We see such beautiful feelings by the very, very simple Yidden, and it's sometimes hard to find. That he says that it's hard to even find it by the highest class of Yiddish people, the most educated Yiddish people. Sometimes you find this beautiful gefilen by the simplest of Yidden. He says this is all. Who do we have to thank? The old, ancient, healthy Yiddish chinuch, the avas haTorah, the love for Torah, the midas toivus, that the zaydis and the grandparents and the elder zaydis they bequeathed as an inheritance to their children and grandchildren. he says, we spoke earlier about this. What type of healthy feelings the Ein Yaakov that takes place between Mincha and Ma'ariv, those shiurim have implanted by Yidden. He says the type of reine Yiddisha people, clean Yiddisha people that the past Medrash Tehillim gave us, produced for us. And Befrat, the Yeshivas of Bnei Torah, they produced such Welt Geonim, Welt Chachamim, those on a world-class Geonim and world-class wise, with the true Emester Tiferes Yisrael, Ateres Tiferes Yisrael, the crown and of beauty of the Yid. The Avos Yisrael spark by each Yid has to be awakened, and will cause and bring about many cries and groups of Yidden that will again play out their roles. Every Yid gives gelt for Torah, and it's a chayvas gavra. It's a personal responsibility for each Yid to take part in, to shtitz, says the Previous Lubavitcher Rebbe, but that's not enough. Each person must know that it's not only by giving an adava to Torah that he'll be yoytze his responsibility as a Yid. Rather, he himself must support Torah from time to time with himself, which means he himself has to be part of Klal Yisrael. Halt mit means be with them. He has to every day learn himself. With the fact that a person does not learn, he becomes farprostet, he becomes simple, coarse, and amaoretz, becomes lowly. And with this, he is causing harm and damage for Klal Yisrael. He's part of Klal Yisrael, and he has to halter by. Upon each Yid, there lies a holy responsibility to do for Klal Yisrael, to strengthen Ateres Tiferes Yisrael, the crown of royalty, of beauty of Am Yisrael, the Hadras Yisrael, the beauty of Yidden, and the Hadras Yisrael, one can only strengthen through actually himself learning. Every person has to give his tircha, his toiling, his efforts and time to recruit more participants and more members in the Torah Shiurim, and he has to have an effect on those his acquaintances, those around him that he knows that they should also sit by the tables of learning, and then it's going to be Yehi Or B'chol Moishes B'nei Yisrael. There's going to be light in all the dwelling places of Yidden.